My name is Paul Nakata. I am the co-founder and CEO of a small tech company called Abbot. We are focused on customer success teams who help their customers in Slack. And the reason that we're putting this webinar on is I have this conversation at least 5 times a week. How to do it, what works, what doesn't work, et cetera. This is not intended to be a sales call. There's a couple of places where I may mention what we do. But the goal here is to just help you understand, will Slack work for you with your customers? How to do it, what are the things that work and don't work, and what's possible. I think we've got a pretty good mix of people currently using Slack and people thinking about using Slack. So I think we'll have a good high-level overview of everything as we go through. Let's talk a little bit about why Slack is useful. Especially for customer communication. I think from a customer success and post-sale view, the biggest thing that we see the biggest benefit that we see Slack providing is that it improves customer activation, especially when these channels are created early on. So, before I started this business, I ran customer development at a machine learning platform, and we had a very long implementation phase. And it used to be that we would do those implementations over WebEx meetings and in-person meetings, and we'd do, twice a week we would get together, et cetera. And just being able to do things in Slack was a huge, huge speed up for us for a lot of reasons. The biggest thing that we saw was that the barrier to conversation was much, much lower. Because Slack is kind of an informal tool, and you can just share small snippets as you're thinking about them, and your customer can do the same. What we saw is that customers were communicating with us much faster and much more regularly, which was really powerful. The other thing that I think is underrated, especially in the world of customer success, is this is a team sport. It's almost never that the customer success person knows the end-to-end of every interaction. You may know the product like the back of your hand, but the moment there's an issue or you want to bring in, an engineer, product manager, et cetera, Slack makes that really easy because you're not forwarding around emails, you're not sending tickets around, et cetera. So I think these things really, really provide a big lift for working with customers specifically. And we'll talk a lot about how to do some of these things in the call. Any questions about this? Anything that people are like, so we see something else here, but okay, awesome. I'll keep flying through. So because we've got a mix of folks who are using this and not using this to customers, let's talk a little bit about how to get your Slack set up for success with your customers, because it's not as simple as just invite people to a Slack. I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. The very basics that you need is you need a Slack workspace to work out of. It sounds like everybody's got one of those, so we can check that box. It's usually easier if your customers are using Slack. Slack has a paid feature called Slack Connect. Slack Connect is a way for you to create a shared channel between your company and your customer's company. Both sides have to be paid Slack workspaces, but the nice thing is it just looks like a channel in your workspace. Teams can invite the right people and come, go, et cetera, and then everybody gets access to that shared stuff. Once you have those things, it's really important to formulate a plan. How are you going to communicate with these customers? Who's responsible for that communication? Who's going to, answer the customers when they're pinging us after hours, if anybody? So I think there's a lot of things that pay to have a process in place before you start inviting customers, because what we don't want to do is expect your customers to understand how your company culture works. And you want to make sure to kind of set things up in a very proactive way. And I put this last one kind of as a joke, but it's true. I think Slack, one of the nice things about it is there's goofy emoji, lots of GIFs flying around. This is a good place to have a sense of humor, right? This is like a good place for you to kind of replace not just the tactical, hey, like, how are things going? It looks like you've got an upgrade coming, et cetera. But also, like, hey, like, here's this funny thing that I saw. I think something that I really love is we're in a bunch of these shared Slacks, as you can imagine, and like every team has their own custom emoji. My favorite currently is somebody's got like an 8-bit dancing wizard that we use on a lot of stuff, and we took that from one of our customers. I've seen a lot of really great ones, but I think it's just kind of a fun way to share company culture. I think, doing what we do, working with customers, sometimes can be a little fraught. If customers are reaching out to you because they're upset about something or something's not working, having those kind of human relationships established through Slack can be really helpful. And I think like over time, you kind of every channel makes their own culture as well. So I think lots of great ways to do that. We've actually got a customer who I think they've been implemented for a long time. They're pretty happy, and all our channel is now is updates from us and then just funny images that they found and put into their Slack. So just something to think about there. If you don't like to laugh, that's okay. You can still use Slack. It just may not be as fun for you. So cool. Once you have all of that stuff, the next thing you need is understanding like how these channels are set up and when to use them, how long they should live, how long you should be planning for them. So here's what we see. And this is across, I probably talked to 75 different teams who are using Slack in this way today. Some teams only use Slack for free trials. So their process is free trial comes in, they automate the creation of these channels. We can help with some of that stuff. They invite the people who are doing the trial, they get that customer activated, and they go, okay, like support is, email us over here, which is okay. Like, I think that's fine. I think if you've got those processes set up, it's a nice way to get started. We've got a lot of teams who primarily use Slack during pre-sales and implementation. So if you've got a platform sale or something that requires some of that custom work, Slack is actually a really great place for handling implementation coordination, primarily because you can bring people in and out. Now, our bread and butter is for the teams that use Slack for ongoing support and customer communication. And so that's, hey, we started this channel at any point in the time, or at any point in our relationship, we're going to keep this open over time. Now, we especially like this because it's a great customer activation tool. We send all of our feature updates in Slack. Hey, happy holidays. That happens through Slack. Hey, I saw your update on LinkedIn. Just wanted to say congratulations. Hey, nice release. Like whatever those things are, we have that going. Now, inside of our customer base, we see two primary setups. We see probably about 75% of the companies that we work with just offer this is their primary support channel. They don't want to use Zendesk. They don't want to set up another support tool. They're just using Slack for all of that. Now, and I think it sounds like maybe Ashley and Jim are in this scenario where there's only certain customers get access to the Slack, right? And this is our enterprise support level, or this is specific customers that are key to us will have the Slack. We've got a pretty good number of teams who charge for access to this Slack, which is kind of interesting. So if you're thinking about professional services, technical implementation services, et cetera, this is something that can often be added as a line item in your contracts. And that's probably more for the sales folks, but I think that is interesting. We've got one customer who charges more than their annual deal value just for access to a dedicated support Slack. And so what they've done is they basically, and I mean, it's a large figure. So very interesting, right? Where they go through and they say, hey, this product costs you $100,000 a year. And if you want support, it's an additional $200K for a TAM team who will just sit in these Slacks. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I think this is really up to you. There's not a best way. It's just genuinely, what is your workflow? When do you want to have the most communication with your customers? For product-led sales teams, free trial may not be the right time because the product handles all that stuff. Anything with hands-on component, I think the earlier you can set these up, the better. And I think I'm doubling down here, but we're certainly seeing for pre-sales, it's really powerful. I don't know for your teams when customer success gets involved. What we often see is when it looks like contracts going to happen, people will bring in their account managers or their, customer experience. In my opinion, is happening much earlier now. Yeah, so I think the idea is get this set up as soon as possible. And again, this is great for reactivation. If your free trial expires, you still have this Slack ready to go. And I think that's really, really fascinating. We'll give Chris a moment here to join. Hey, Chris, how's it going?
It's going good. Sorry
for being awesome. You haven't missed much. We did some quick intros. I would say we're pretty early on. The only downside is we've asked everybody to memorize parts of a song, and at the end, we're all going to sing it. So you'll have to You'll just have to join in. Don't worry, we may not have time for song and dance stuff. Just to kind of get you caught up to where we're at right now, is we just talked a little bit about what kind of teams are using Slack as far as we've seen, and where we're seeing customers get added to these Slacks. Chris, if you could just give me a super high level, do you currently use Slack at your place of work with customers?
We do. We can't use it for everybody.
Okay.
It's too much of a high load for our software engineers otherwise, so they complain. But with our largest customers, I think it's like 200K ARR, 300 seats and up.
Okay.
We have a private direct Slack channel with them, but it can still be a challenge because sometimes they'll pop a good question in there, or they forget that there's a separate Zendesk support channel, and they'll like pop an actual support issue in there, and nobody sees it for longer than is expected, or
Okay. And do you, just because we talked about this a few minutes ago, do you use Slack Connect? Do you know, or is it primarily guests in your Slack?
We use both.
Okay,
so
cool.
A lot of our customers have their own. So yeah, we have Slack Connects whenever we can.
Okay.
But then it's even harder to manage because now they have 50 people in the channel instead of 3.
Okay, awesome. So actually your timing is pretty good for joining. We were just talking about why would you set these up and how might it look? And I literally was just talking about how, lots of teams kind of limit who can access these Slacks. So I think perfect timing. And I'm recording this, so I'll just send you the call as well, so you'll have all that stuff. I just wanted to make sure that I'm sharing things that are pertinent. So cool, yeah. So what we see is it pays to get your customers in as quickly as possible, because you can disconnect the conversations that happen in Slack with contractual terms and all those other things. So if you're doing implementation work, you want to reactivate, Slack can be really good, especially if you're good at sending updates through there. Something that we hear a lot, a big concern that we hear is, what is your customer expectation if you put them in a Slack? Fortunately, most of what we hear is that it's actually pretty similar to email. If you've got a customer that is high demand in email, they will continue to be high demand in Slack. But in general, we have not seen customers being unreasonable with our customers in terms of, hey, I messaged you this thing on Saturday at 10 p.m. and I haven't heard back, and now it's Sunday morning. Like that hasn't happened as far as we're aware. And I'm sure everybody's got problem customers that do that. What we do see, though, is most people who provide customer support this way are dealing with teams who also use Slack at the office. And so what we tend to see is, hey, they're around office hours as well. And that's a little difficult with everybody working remotely. But in general, we tend to see people okay, I understand it's Saturday, I may not get an answer right now. One thing I will say that is maybe counterintuitive is that customers are much more likely to reach out about questions than we've seen previously. And so where this really happens is somebody looking for documentation, or somebody who's got a question that they feel is really simple. Now, I think there's a lot of different ways to handle that. I know we've got some teams who are just I don't want to talk to any of these customers. I want to automate, send them the documentation. I don't want to hear anything about it. But we do have a couple of teams who really care a lot about that, especially in the customer experience world. They really see it as, maybe we've got a fault in our doc searchability or something in product. So I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. I would say if you're thinking about setting this up, pick a company you like working with, and set up a channel with them first, and just make sure that cadence is there. The idea is that because this is an informal communication medium, the barrier to talking and replying should be lower. So just something to keep in mind there. Before you set anything up, and it sounds like probably half of the folks here have already done this, is you should really have a plan before you set up any of these channels, right? You should know a handful of things. These are, in my mind, the most important questions that you should know the answers to before you start. And those questions are, how fast should your team respond? Okay, because it's not like another team Slack. It's not like chatting with people in your general room or engineering room or wherever, because they're not your coworkers yet. You're trying to establish this team lift, but you want to set these expectations internally. Are you bound by SLAs? Most SLAs that we see are on the support side. So Zendesk has all the tooling, and people don't really think that much about what happens in Slack. But there are teams who say, hey, our responsibility is response on any channel. And so you really need to know that before you set that up. Teams that are bound by SLAs, of course, want to set up fewer of these channels because the responsibility for responding in time is much higher. Is there adequate coverage? So if you have a sales workflow that says we have 500 trials for every 5 conversions, and we've staffed our customer team for those 5 conversions, you probably don't want to use Slack for all of your free trials until you understand like what that load looks like. Coverage is kind of a broad one. I think what we see today actually is fewer teams doing 24/7 support and more doing business hour support with some kind of follow the sun support add-on. And that actually seems like it's worked pretty well in Slack for most people. Is they just say like, hey, our working hours are 9 to 6 Pacific time, and after that time, it's support time. There's a bunch of stuff we can do around business hours and stuff like that that might be interesting. And then finally, like think about who you actually want in those channels. So lots of different ways to do it. What we mostly see is customer success is the primary person, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means. And that they'll bring people in. There's a couple of teams that we work with who will put their support people across all the rooms, and they just are there kind of watching and keeping an eye on things. The most important thing is just being intentional about who's in the room to begin with, just so it's not confusing to your customer, because it's just like bringing people into a fresh meeting. Now, Slack makes something really nice, which is anytime somebody needs to be involved, they can jump in, they can say the things that they need, and they can pop back out. Our experience is that first responder, in fact, it's probably a good segue, that first responder, that primarily responsible person is responsible for, to use a sports term, they're quarterbacking things, right? They're the ones coordinating who's in the response chain. We are very firm believers that setting up a first responder with those expectations, hey, our goal is to respond within 30 minutes. If somebody asks a question, we may not have the answer, but we want to be responsive. That first responder is the person responsible for making sure that happens, even if that means bringing somebody else in. The reason that we see this being extremely effective is it removes a very common customer failure mode, which is I didn't know who was supposed to respond, and it was easiest for me not to do anything. And that is the one thing that you can do in Slack that will make your customers very unhappy, because they just don't want to wait like that. So I think this is worth thinking about writing down. If you have account managers that have affinity to the team, it's really simple, or to your customer, it's really simple. That's the person who should be your first responder. We've got a few customers who teamwork all of their customer success as well. So they've got 4 or 5 people responding to hundreds of customers. And so they've got a different set of how they like to do that, right? There's this time-based. The important thing to take away here is just knowing that there's a rule, who should be responding, and if there's a problem, who should know about that. Any questions here? Because I know this is kind of like a little bit wonky, and this is like the eat your vegetables part of using Slack, is just knowing who should be following in on stuff. Cool. All right, no questions. I love it. Awesome. So all this stuff is to get to the point of what do you do to make this all work? I think if you've got one channel, it's pretty easy. You've got your one customer channel shows up under connections and it turns red or bold, and you just jump in and off you go. I think it's much tougher when you have a lot of these and you're doing a lot of different business flows with them. So something that we recommend is naming your channels in a specific way. We make pretty heavy use of Slack grouping. The reason that we like naming things a specific way is it's clear about what the intention of this team is. Now, there's something that I want to mention that is a subtle thing in Slack that may cause headaches. If you create these rooms as a private room, so you set up your Slack Connect and you say it's private, I'm the one in control of who can do things, change things, etc. It's not possible for your customer to rename that room, which can be a little frustrating. So if you create the name and it says, trial series, our company name is a serious business, so you see a lot of serious stuff in here. But so if I were to start that channel as trial serious with my customer, then they're not able to change it even after we convert them. So just be aware of that. If that's the case, I would make more use of this kind of grouping thing, and then kind of control things in that way. And then we just changed the team name. When you do this in public, it's nice because like our product manager and some teams' product managers can jump into these if they want to ask questions about certain features or something like that to these customers. They know, hey, here are the right people for us to talk to in here. This is like kind of a, excuse me, kind of like a subtle thing, but just understanding like what your customer sees and what they can rename is sometimes valuable. Who should be invited? I know I've talked about this a few times. I think everybody who talks to customers should be in these rooms. I think that's valuable to your customers, right? It's nice for them to have all the right people there. We think a lot about sales handoffs. I think that's something that is important to be considering. Your sales handoffs basically are your customer's experience of your company. So if your salesperson sets up the channel as part of a trial or part of an implementation, again, I would advocate get customer advocates in there as quickly as possible and just have them in the room so you can make those introductions. It doesn't have to be tied off of your deal closing in Salesforce or whatever your CRM is. So I think there's a lot of things you can do here. The one name that's in this list, that I'm still on the fence about. I think right now we recommend customer support joining, but we're starting to move away from that recommendation a little bit. And that's primarily because we found customer support, especially like engineering support, tends to be deeper. And Slack is often not the place where the communication happens. It's often in like Zendesk or something like that. So we're still kind of feeling out the right recommendation there. But the idea is that the cost of adding those people is very low. And all you do is, increase the service area by which your customers can get some support. And then, the last thing I would say about the kind of the mechanics of this is kind of back to the have some fun angle. Make heavy use of emoji. We do this. We've got tooling that triggers off of this, but even without any tooling, using these emoji allow your customers and your team to understand that somebody's working on something. So way back when I was at GitHub early on, the sales and the support team all worked out of a shared email inbox. And anytime a question came in that required a deeper answer, merge strategies or what have you, we would send an email to the entire team, #got it, right? And that would just let people know, hey, we're working on this response. So that our customers wouldn't get 4 or 5 responses that probably look pretty similar, but they don't need that. They don't need that kind of flow. Emojis would have made that a lot simpler. And what we see time and time again is, hey, I'm looking at this. I'll put the eyes emoji on it. My customer knows I'm looking at it, and then everybody else knows that it's happening. We use the green check marks, the green check mark, just to say, hey, like this is resolved. This is more useful for me. Like if I'm going through and I want to look at how all of our customers are doing, I want to make sure no questions are unanswered. And if I don't have tools available that let me figure that out, I can just kind of scan really quickly. Hey, this check mark kind of tells me what the situation is. What I should have added in an earlier screen, and I realized I didn't, is that we really recommend using threading for most of our customers, and that threading is really useful for putting everything into a single bucket, right? So like, hey, this entire thread is about, do we have permissions set up? This entire thread is about, there's a question about a feature, et cetera. And that makes it really easy to scan and then look for those emoji. Any questions here about like just using emoji with customers or setting up these channels and communicating with them? I think we're good. I know I'm just kind of flying through things. So, okay, awesome. I'll keep rolling through. Cool. Customer activation, I think, is everybody's favorite topic. If you work with customers, how do you keep them with you? How do you keep them excited? Like, how do you use Slack once it's set up? I suspect if you've got one channel with a customer, you're probably doing this already. Where this falls down is if you've got a bunch of channels with customers, it's easy to let them, for them to fall off the radar. So what we love about Slack is you can just have this cadence of like, hey, how are things going? Happy Friday, happy Wednesday. Hey, we're closed on Thanksgiving. Like whatever those things are, you wouldn't send an email for that, but you're now in like a co-team with your customers. You all kind of work together. You're all in the same Slack together, effectively. And so this really gives you the opportunity to get to know your customer. I think the guidance I would offer is don't send walls of text, like don't send emails through Slack. This is something that we see, and like it probably works just as well as email. And yes.
Okay. I love everything that you're saying so far, but
Yep.
a big, huge question came to me because I work in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yep.
So documentation is essential.
Yep.
All contact documentation. How do you document? How do you keep some kind of organization to,
Yep.
because right now I've got 7 million channels and it's a mess, honestly.
First of all, this is a wonderful question, and I'm glad you asked it because I feel like it's a layup. I've actually got a slide, maybe 2 slides from now, that will talk about one
Okay.
kind of coordination, and that kind is just like, how do I deal with all the various errata that we need to keep track of between my customer and me? So that's one type of organization. That's the local in this room organization. I sense that you may also be asking about, hey, I've got 100 rooms. How do I make sure that everybody in these 100 rooms has been responded to? Is that
Exactly? That's another one. Yep.
okay? Okay. So that second one, I think, like, I'll be super frank, it's difficult in Slack. They have not offered a lot of tooling around bulk management. So much so that we started a business just to do that part. So I will touch on a couple of things about Abbot. Like I said, it's not meant to be a sales call, so I don't intend to like get too deep into it, but we've got some tools that will help with that specific thing. Our part of the reason that we built this is because we had somebody we worked with who said that they had 200 channels and 3 people managing them, and they were constantly losing stuff. And the CTO was spending hours every day scrolling, and like he wanted to be writing software. So I think there's a couple of pieces there. So let's do this. Let me show you the suggestions about just in the channel recommendations, and we'll talk a little bit more about broad management. And if I haven't answered your questions through that, like, I'd be happy to dig in about some specific tactics for your use case if that works for you.
Mm-hmm. That's
cool.
Great.
Awesome. I love it. Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So we'll keep these simple, and the idea is don't give your customers a wall of text, make it really easy for them to ask questions, respond, etc. And this is why I loved your question, Anne, is what we do is we use bookmarks in our channels for a lot of the kind of local stuff. So we do a lot of implementation work as part of like what we do. Basically, we show up in a customer, we help them design their workflows inside of Slack. And we'll do things like, hey, I've got this spreadsheet that contains all of my implementation checklists before we can do custom ticketing integrations. Like we integrate like Zendesk, HubSpot, GitHub, et cetera. And I've got the separate checklist that, hey, here's who's doing what, here's what the plan is, et cetera. You can do that really simply right in Slack. In your channel, if you go to the, like, up by the name of the channel, so it'll be like hashtag whatever, right under there, and I think it's a relatively new feature, is this add a bookmark link, and you can put whatever URL you want in there. You can create folders. You can see I've got a meeting notes folder that we've used for some customers before. And the idea is this is like a really handy, like, shared bookmark bar between you and your customers. So everybody can see what's in here. You can set it up, you can add things here. Sometimes we'll see people will like change these bookmarks out a lot. They'll put like a date in the file name, and they'll just say like, oh, this is January implementation to-dos or whatever, and they'll have this stuff there. So I think this has been really powerful for we use it even though we've got a tool that helps us do other stuff. It's a nice way to have a button click. And then Abbot is we have like a really easy way to do things right inside of chat. This is generally more used for, hey, we can help with your documentation search, or there's some frequently asked questions, and we've got this. Abbot's got like a way to remember facts and things, and so we've got another way to do that. Any questions about this stuff? I know in pharmaceutical world you're in a little bit of a different regulatory environment, especially around like shared documents. But what I would say is anything that's got a URL that you can paste in here can go here. So if you've got like a mutually agreed upon data room or anything like that everybody can access, you can include those here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think this is a really hard problem, is just making sure that everybody's got access to the same information. So it's a very good question. Cool. And then I think metrics is a really interesting part of this. This will definitely happen more at scale. If Chris was able to stick around, he would care about this, I'm sure. Hopefully he'll see this on the video. The conversations you have in Slack are wonderful for informing your QBRs. Because you've got this shared conversation thing, and you can scroll back through and say, here are the key conversations we had over the last quarter. Hey, we talked about, you gave us some feature requests in November and we shipped them in January, or, hey, you asked about X and we got this answer. Being able to kind of highlight those things and, create snippets and put them in your QBR is super powerful. I think, a lot of times what we see is the QBR does not happen with a customer directly, right? It's you and your customer's boss, your customer's boss's boss, right? So it's like a nice way to say, hey, like your employee is doing a lot of work with us. There, we're working together and we've got this spirit of collaboration, et cetera. So I think this is extremely powerful. Very underrated benefit of Slack is just understanding kind of the ongoing health of your customer. And then because it's informal, what we see is that QBRs are less surprising. And that's true for internal too, right? Like your customer health should be less of a surprise. You don't want your customers saying at renewal time, we're actually downgrading, or we're going to churn off, or, all of those kind of scary things. If you're talking to them regularly, you should know that far ahead. And it can be as simple as like, hey, I've said happy Friday to you every week for 30 weeks and you used to always respond with a dancer emoji, and now you don't. I just want to check in. How are things going? And so I think there's a ton of power in that. It's especially true if you're trying to scale and you don't necessarily have your finger on the pulse of every single customer. You can kind of look at those pieces of activity. We do have some tools for managing metrics in Slack. Slack gives you some information specifically around activity in channels. So you can see like this channel is more busy than that channel in DMs. And we track conversation volume between your team and your external teams. And we track stuff like, response times and things like that. So if this is something that you care about, if you're a metrics driven organization and you're thinking about, hey, I've got a team of 20 customer success people, and I just want to make sure that we're doing the things that we said we would do, we've got some tooling for that. There are a couple other companies that focus on overall Slack reporting, but for customer focused stuff, I think we probably have the most customer success focused direct things. Lots of different stuff we can do, slice and dice here. Like I said, not meant to be a sales call, but just know like metrics are available if that's something that you care about. And then this is like maybe my favorite thing to talk about, certainly top two, and that's what's changing, right? Ann and I were talking about this earlier. Customer success is a new field, right? Like we're all learning how to make this work, what to do, why we do it, what tools are available. I think we have a very strong opinion. We're an automation company, so our job is to help customer success teams automate the boring stuff. We think that humans should be free to be creative and do human things, and that robots should do the robotic work. I think there's a lot of stuff that happens in these channels that can be called robotic work. So things like updating statuses, opening tickets, reporting, et cetera. So there's a few ways to do it. If you enjoy doing technical stuff yourself, Slack has some feature built in called Slack Workflows. Slack Workflows let you kind of like pick and choose, hey, when this event occurs, I want you to do this other thing. You can have it run some code. You can build your own bot. You can just build your own Slack bot that sits in those rooms and does a bunch of work. Abbot exists, of course. We have taken all the stuff that we've learned and we put it into an automated tool where you just like put it in the channel and it handles things. I think there's a lot of approaches here that are available. I think the most important thing to think about, whether we become best of friends or we never talk again, is don't make your team do stuff that a computer can do really easily. And so that's things like I want to copy and paste my customer's request into a Zendesk ticket is a really big one. Like Zendesk's got an okay integration. We've got a really great one. I think there's lots of ways to do that. Don't put yourself in a position where you're scrolling through all of your channels and making sure that somebody's been responded to. There's tools that can do that, et cetera. And there's lots of other great integrations you can use. The other thing,
can I ask another quick question?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because I see your things about the integrations here.
Yep.
So are you saying other popular integrations? Okay. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about ChatGPT. So
Yep.
That's number one. But other popular integrations to Salesforce or HubSpot or anything like that, you're telling me that can happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of these companies have their own integrations. I think people recognize that there's a lot of work happening in Slack. Abbot is an integration system. So like we integrate with a bunch of tools as well. I think what we've seen is all of the top, if you're using a top 5 piece of software in any category, there's probably a Slack integration for it. I think like in general, people create these. Why people might use our integration for like say Zendesk versus Zendesk's own integration is because it's designed for customer facing more than not. So Slack has an app directory. And I think if you just go to slack.com/apps, you can see like a list of things, and you can just kind of browse and click stuff to add those apps to your Slack. There's some subtleties around what can be run inside of these shared channels. So like what they've got access to changes depending on who created the channel. So if one of your customers is the one who initiates the Slack Connect connection, their apps are the ones that will work in that channel, and they will have access to the things in their workspace. So if you've got like a slash command that does something, if you haven't used a slash command before, it's just when you type like / and then some command, like a Slack app will trigger from that. And then some bot stuff won't work the same. So we always advocate for people, for people owning their Slack Connect connection with their customers, because it allows you to add, whatever tooling you want, et cetera. Does that answer your question? I know there's kind of a broad topic, integrations in Slack.
Yeah, no, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, awesome, wonderful. ChatGPT, I just threw in because everybody's talking about it. In the world of customer success and customer success tooling, it's actually not that big an industry. There's like a handful of companies working in this space, and so we've been talking to a lot of teams about how they're viewing generative AI. I think today, first of all, everybody here is safe, right? I think talking to customers, I certainly wouldn't trust a robot to do it. But what we do see is some interesting inroads being made into things like ChatGPT has really good language understanding capabilities. And so, as you're hearing about the GPT-3 and ChatGPTs of the world, I think it's safe to say customer success will be safe because humans want to talk to humans. But in the same vein of letting robots do the robotic work, what it's really good at is understanding things like, here's our documentation and how do we find things inside this documentation? Or, hey, here are the things that we know are true. How do I make some, how do I extract some understanding out of here? So, we're looking a little bit into it now. The thing that we're thinking about is a documentation use case. Hey, this customer is asking this question. Can we serve them the right documentation quickly? I do think there's a lot of other great tools being developed kind of in this space. If you were tempted to try something out, I would very strongly advocate against any chatbot stuff. I think chatbots were a big deal a few years ago, and people thought hey, I'm going to put this thing up here. Them. Everybody hates them, right? Because even if they're right, the moment you're talking to a robot, you don't care. Nobody wants to go through the phone tree. So I would just advocate against that. But I think there is a lot of interesting tooling available.
Yeah, I was just, ChatGPT is, we do generative AI. That's cool. What my company does. So, awesome. So that's why I was interested to hear what you were thinking in this particular vein. So I appreciate it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of really wonderful generative use cases. I just wouldn't trust a customer with it. Even if it's a customer I know, I don't want a thing sending messages to that customer. I don't want to get too deep into the rabbit hole, but I'm sure these technologies are not good at admitting what they don't know, and you run the risk of it giving just bad advice because it can't say I have no idea. And a person can do that. A person can say, actually, there's somebody else we should get involved. So
I will tell you that last night I was messing with it and I asked who I was, and it said it didn't know. So it does.
Right. It can learn.
Yeah, it is learning. It is, it depends on what it's pulling from too and such. But let's move on. I actually have to drop off at 5:02. So
I've got good. You're like my favorite person because you are timing this perfectly. This is the end of it. I do want to shout out. Ashley mentioned the Zoom integration, which is incredible. I use it probably 10 times a day. It's really nice. You can start a Zoom meeting right from Slack. It's really, really cool.
Oh, that's good to know. That's really good to know.
That's roughly what I've got to say. I mean, I know it's kind of a broad race through how to chat with customers and chat in Slack specifically. What I would say is if you've got questions now, let's chat about them now. If you think about anything else, any other questions that we didn't talk about, first of all, Abbot does a bunch of stuff. You're always welcome to email me directly, send me a message on LinkedIn. I, of course, want more people using our software, but I think the more people using Slack with their customers, the better off everybody is. I like working that way. And I think most people prefer to work that way. So anything we can do to support that, we would love to do that.
Well, like I said, I don't have any other questions right now. We're a startup.
Yep.
I think I'm employee number 20,
Cool.
heading up customer success, but
Cool.
have to, I've got a lot of scaling to do. I've got a lot of things to do because I'm wearing 7 million different hats right now. But I think this was really helpful to have this foundation so that I understand as I'm scaling some of the things that I can do and who I can reach out to in order to make it work.
And specifically, if you're interested, I'm happy to chat with you separately as well. I built all the post-sale stuff at an ML platform literally just before this. So I built out customer success, training, support, and implementations. So if you're thinking about those things, I'd be happy to share what worked for us. Specifically, like you've got depending on your implementation time, I think those things can be especially painful to kind of get everything integrated and run. So
exactly. Well, thank you. What I'd like to do is to come back to you. I started in November, so I'm still pretty fresh in my world right now.
I love it.
So if I could, I'd like to maybe after Q2, maybe we connect again.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would say just email me anytime or message me anytime. At least like open offer, just because, I got some great advice when I was figuring it out, and I'm happy to share what I've learned and that advice.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I want to thank you for your time. And I'm really sorry for kind of, commandeering the conversation here. So I apologize to everybody else on the call. Thank you.
No, this is great. Ashley, Jim, good to see you, and enjoy your meeting.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Jim, Ashley, are there any questions I can answer for you? I'm happy to dive around, share anything I can.
No questions. A lot of good food for thought. Things that is actually kind of timely because we just did a reorg and restructuring how we're managing our customers.
Got it.
So just looking at different ways to improve communication while managing expectations is really huge, and it's a lot on relationship building. So this touched on quite a few things that we're already thinking about as of a week. So yes, it is a lot of good food for thought. And if we're looking or we're going more in the right direction and we need more reporting or automation around it, I'll definitely reach out.
Cool. And the offer is the same for the two of you as well. Like if there's other things where you're like, hey, what are you saying here? I'm always happy to answer questions. Oh, Jim, I think you might be muted.
Maybe on your headset you're muted because we can't.
Yeah, it looks like you're not muted through Zoom. Still can't hear you, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
If you have a question, if you want to type it, I'd be happy to go that way. We can play typing music. I'm glad you can still hear us at least. This happens a lot. I have a mute button on my microphone, and I feel like I hit that at weird times. Pretty regularly. Let me stop my share too. Cool. I see Jim's typing. So Ashley, how long have you been? Where are you working now? What is your?
I'm at Flow Space. So we are.
Okay.
Yeah, supply chain software tech company. So another startup, and I've been here for it'll be 2 years next month.
Awesome. Okay, so you're a grizzled startup veteran. I feel like it gets everybody. Yes. Okay, Joe, I'm glad that we hit the right stuff. Hopefully, if you've got more questions, again, just let us know. If we can help, of course, we love to help through Abbot, but I'm just personally always very excited to help. Well, awesome. Listen, I appreciate you all taking the time. I will send this webinar to you all, so you can just kind of review it if you want to take a look. I'm happy to share my slides as well if that's useful. And then, like I said, the offer is open. If there's anything that you'd like to learn more about, please let me know. We're always happy to chat. So thanks so much.
All right, awesome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hey, we hear you.
Go figure.
He returned. I love it.
All right.
Oh, hey, take care.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody. Bye.